Can we recover after an affair? This is a question I'm asked a lot of times. Is it even possible? Do people survive? Is it terminal for the relationship or not? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's begin, shall we? Navigating the time immediately after an affair has been discovered is one of the most profoundly soul-searching journeys you are ever going to go on. It is literally like standing at a crossroads in your life and trying to work out, what am I going to do? Will we continue on together, or is it time for us to separate? A lot of women really believe when they begin this journey that they will leave their partner until they're in the situation, and then there is a whole host of other things that come into play. It's a complex process, and it really requires both people to think about things like forgiveness. Is there genuine remorse for what's happened? And is it even possible to try to rebuild trust? As we've discussed in earlier workshops, that time post finding out is just emotionally like being on a roller coaster ride. Anger, sadness, confusion. There's just so much going on. But in addition to that, as you move forward, it's the questions of, is this emotionally safe for me? Is there respect here? Will this person help fulfill our hopes, dreams, and be honest about things moving forward? So delving into questions about what your shared values are, communication, personal boundaries becomes a really crucial part of if you can actually move forward or not. It's not a simple process, and it is not for the faint-hearted, and I highly recommend that you have help doing this. I think that trying to do this alone is really, really challenging. The decision to stay really requires both parties to earnestly explore whether the relationship can evolve into something healthier or more authentic, or whether both partners are willing to actively work on addressing all of the underlying issues that happened prior to the affair. Choosing to go on involves acknowledging, what things are working well, and to step away from all of the painful things that have just happened. That is a big ask, to be able to step back and move away from things that have wounded you really deeply. So when you're looking at if you can stay or go, it is time to really think about, can I move past this or not? If you believe that there's a possibility that healing can happen, then you may have a future together. If both of you are willing to take responsibility and work moving forward. Now, someone will go, why do I have to take responsibility, Debbie? And I'll answer those questions at the end. But it's about understanding this is a really big process to move forward. There has to be a lot of introspection. You've got to both be looking inside going, what happened here? And of course, the future is just laden with uncertainties, vulnerabilities. There'll be times when you have no patience. There'll be no compassion on either side. And to move forward in really honest ways takes a lot of courage on what you decide to do next. Of course, the most important thing is thinking about your emotional health and well-being, and whatever you choose to do, making sure that that is really aligned to your values and aligned to what you hope and dream for in your whole life. So it's not for the faint-hearted. That's the first thing. The next thing is, it is a huge process. And as I said before, I highly recommend you get professional help. It is really challenging to try and do this by yourself. Let's say you have decided that, yep, you know what, we want to try. We want to try and see if we can salvage things. And if you believe that there is a possibility that you could do that, here are the things, when I'm working with clients and I walk them through this process, these are the things I cover with them. So the first thing is that, of course, to seek professional help. You've got to talk to somebody who is qualified. Your friends are not qualified. Your family is not qualified. People on the internet who you randomly meet who do workshops like this, don't trust them. Make sure you do your due diligence and you find somebody who is qualified to actually help you. I am a qualified, university qualified therapist and coach. So you want to get some professional help and do your due diligence when you do that. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, Both partners need to be transparent and candid and receptive. Now, those are really challenging things to do when you are feeling wounded and hurt, or you have done something deplorable and wounded somebody you love. But that is really important if there's going to be any kind of honest communication with each other. And that communication is pivotal in helping you move through what has happened. So it is really important that there is transparency. Both people have got to be really open to what really happened, candid about how they feel, and that can be very painful. I watch as people share with their partners why they had affairs, and that can feel very wounding, especially if they have felt like their partner was no longer available to them. And of course, being receptive to that, being able to listen to it and hear it, not necessarily agree with it, but being able to step in and say, I'm willing to be open to hear what you have to say. So honest and open communication are essential. The person who has had the affair must absolutely express sincere remorse and sincerely apologize. It is no good having somebody placate you by apologizing. This is the way we do it with children. You know, we say to kids, you've got to apologize. Well, if the person isn't genuinely wanting to apologize, it is a waste of time. It has to be a genuine, heartfelt, really sincere apology. And they need to really be sorry. They need to really understand and acknowledge the pain that they've caused and take responsibility for what they've done, because without that, it is almost impossible to move forward. And some of you might be saying, well, of course they're going to say they're sorry. Well, actually, no. I've been in situations where a partner who has had an affair is not sorry. They're like, well, this is on you. You did this. You behaved in this way. You weren't there for me. You didn't, I tried to work with you and you weren't willing to. And so they don't apologize. So although we think it is likely that they will, sometimes they don't. Of course, it is really important to rebuild trust, and everybody knows that once trust is shattered, it is a really slow walk back to get trust rebuilt in the relationship. It requires the person who had the affair to be incredibly consistent, really put in a lot of effort, really show that they can be believed. They need to prove their trustworthiness. They've got to be reliable and honest, and they've got to be transparent. And if they don't do that, they're jeopardizing things. This can mean that they have to do this for a long time. And when I'm working with particularly men who've had affairs, who genuinely want to stay with their partner, it's really important for me to let them know this is a really slow walk back, and you are going to have to reassure your partner every day, possibly for a very long time, and they need to do it until the other party feels like they can trust again. So they don't get to demand, well, I've been doing this for 6 months, or I've been doing this for 12 months and you should trust me now. The situation is very clear, and that is, you will not get trust back until the person who you have wounded decides they can trust you again, and that can take a long time. Of course, we need to set boundaries, and this is really important. We need clearly defined boundaries within the relationship to prevent future misunderstandings and to really nurture a sense of security in the relationship. Getting a mutual agreement on what is acceptable behavior is absolutely essential. And this seems like it would be logical, but it's not. Sometimes the first request is you cannot see that person ever again. But what happens if the person is in your workplace? What happens if the person is your boss? What happens if the person is somebody you cannot avoid? Then it becomes really challenging, and setting boundaries around what has to happen is super important. So setting boundaries is something, again, I think you need help from a therapist with, to guide you through what sort of boundaries you need to be looking at, how to set those boundaries, how to enforce those boundaries, because of course it's fine and dandy saying let's set a boundary, but sometimes boundaries are broken or crossed, and that is when we need to know exactly what we do in those circumstances. The next one is a controversial one, which is practicing forgiveness. Not everybody wants to forgive, okay? Personally, I think if you want to create a stable, happy, fulfilling, loving relationship, there needs to be forgiveness. But not everybody can do that. Forgiveness is a really gradual process. It's about releasing the anger and the resentment inside of ourselves. It's about letting go of that inside of ourselves. there has to be an awful lot of patience on your partner's behalf, a lot of empathy towards each other's emotions as you go through this process. Like I said, it isn't fast, and in the early days, the just drenching through and rehashing information over and over and over again, and feeling really just betrayed in the worst way possible makes it quite hard to forgive. But if you're wanting the relationship to move forward, it is incredibly helpful if you can forgive your partner to move forward. It's just really helpful. For those of you who say, why should I forgive what they've done? Then they just get away with it. That is not what forgiveness is. So forgiveness is about releasing the anger and resentment inside of me. I get peace when I forgive, and that is again something it's really helpful to do with a professional, because it can be really challenging. One of the other things that is interesting is intimacy post-affair. So as we're trying to rekindle an emotional bond, we may want to be trying to rekindle a physical bond as well. This can be challenging in a couple of ways. I've seen it flip both ways. I've seen it where the intimacy in the relationship goes to 150%. It's really intense, it's really overwhelming, and it's like they've never had it before. And generally that comes from a space of trying to prove something, and that's not a good idea. And then there can be the opposite of that, which can be, I can't tolerate it. Just the thought of what you've done. There's just no way I can be intimate with you at all. So my recommendation is always try to spend really good quality time together, engaging in activities that help build the emotional bond between you and not pushing things. Trying to be affectionate towards each other in non-sexual ways can be super helpful. Trying to understand that it's going to take some time, particularly if you were unfortunate enough to see something digitally. You've seen photographs or videos, or you've heard conversations, or you've seen text messages. That can be really, really challenging, because when we see something, it's really challenging to unsee it. And so that can really intrude in that emotional and physical connection again. So those are things to be worked on, and taking time to do that again. Again, working with a therapist can be a great way of doing that if both parties are really wanting to actually make a go of it. So you've both got to want to do that, otherwise therapy won't work either. One of the most essential things and one of the most challenging things that I see is actually addressing the underlying issues in the relationship. And this can be a hotbed of nastiness. This can be where the messenger is really in trouble, which is generally me. But to actually resolve the problems and to look at why this affair happened in the first place, we have to dive into what was going on for both of you at the time, and looking into the unmet needs of both people at the time. That can feel really exposing, really painful, really distressing. And I will often hear from one party, usually the party who was on the receiving end of the affair, why the hell should I take responsibility? This person did this to me. I had nothing to do with it. They were an ass. And my response is, if they're at therapy and they actually want to move forward, there was stuff underneath this that caused this affair. Generally, not always, of course there are exceptions, but generally speaking, whether it's they've stopped connecting emotionally. And we listed out in earlier in this series some of the reasons why people have an affair. Maybe it's the time in their life, maybe it's their feeling that the relationship has gotten really stale, maybe they want excitement, maybe their partner's just not into them anymore. There's a lot of things that go on. So having really deep, in-depth conversations about the underlying issues is so important. It's not possible to do that alone, because first of all, you may not be aware of the underlying issues. Secondly, it needs to be a really safe environment to do that. And thirdly, you have to be receptive to hearing it, and that can be really tricky. Doing it with somebody who is qualified to do it will help you walk through that process and make it less confronting, less emotionally decimating, because it can feel like that. And so having somebody there to guide you through the process is really important.